Now, Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba will embark on a roadshow to the United States next week, where he's expected to address international investors. It's his first trip abroad since he replaced Pravin Gordhan as the political head of the country's Treasury. This comes at a time where there are fears that South Africa will experience a recession. South Africa has been downgraded to junk status by two ratings agencies, S&P Global as well as Fitch. Now, for more, we are joined now from our Parliament studio by Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba. Minister, thanks so much for your time. Could you share with us information about your engagements with the private sector regarding your plans to deal with the difficult economic situation that we're facing as South Africa at the moment?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. We have been engaging over the last few days with various stakeholders, members of the Banking Association of South Africa. We addressed the social partners the day before yesterday at NEDLEC, where we explained to them the implications of the downgrade and the steps we are going to take in order to try and contain the situation and actually restore South Africa's investment grade. We also briefed the President on Monday, together with the Deputy Minister, the Director General, the Governor of the Reserve Bank and the Commissioner of SARS. And yesterday and today we decided to meet with with the domestic investors that hold 60% of South Africa's bonds in order to also take them into our confidence with regards to the steps we are taking in order to deal with this situation before we can even embark on an international roadshow. So we have been having fruitful discussions with them, listening to their concerns, answering their questions as candidly as possible. We think that there is a growing appreciation of the manner, the seriousness with which both Treasury and government in general take these downgrades and the steps that we intend taking in order to restore South Africa's investment grade. It's not going to be easy, and we don't want anyone to think that these downgrades do not have serious implications. We also have ensured that through the President and particularly the African National Congress, everybody who speaks on this issue expresses both the same level of understanding as well as empathy for those people who are going to be impacted by the downgrades that we have experienced.
Minister, these steps that you're going to take, will we see a change in any policy or any kind of innovation, or will you stick to the script that your predecessor had?
Quite clearly, because the concerns that the investors are raising are also whether we are going to stick to fiscal discipline and the policy of fiscal consolidation. We are going to do exactly that. We are going to ensure that government doesn't spend money we do not have. We need to ensure that whatever the social pressures there may be, we stick to the budgetary framework that we agreed to when we presented the budget in February this year and at the MTBPS last year. Because this budget is a collective decision of cabinet, and we are not coming here to institute any changes to it, but to ensure that it is implemented to the letter. So we have indicated to all the investors that we are going to stick to the fiscal discipline and fiscal consolidation, and that there's going to be focus on our part on inclusive growth to implement those programs such as the microeconomic reforms, the structural reforms contained in the 9-point plan that will ensure that the South African economy grows, and because it's much more important for us to focus on growing the economy and share a growing economy than a shrinking economy. But we're also going to focus on the governance of state-owned companies, some of which issues are being addressed through the Interministerial Committee on SOCs, which is chaired by the Deputy President. But quite clearly, there are issues which we need to do on an urgent basis to address governance issues in various state-owned companies, to address the vacancies that have been prevalent in many of the state-owned companies for quite long, to ensure that there is clarity with regards to who occupies the positions of chief executives and chief financial officers. But we're also requesting Cabinet to provide clarity with regard to certain policies that are going to attract investments and ensure that we grow our economy. Because even though our economy is expected to grow this year, we need to take measures that are going to ensure that investments come in and that growth is realized. And so there is a great deal of walking the talk that we need to do, and agents that National Treasury needs to place on ensuring the implementation of those policies that will restore confidence in the South African economy, both from domestic as well as international investors.
Minister, you speak about the need to restore confidence as well as the policies such as inclusive growth. We've also heard a lot of radical economic transformation coming through. How are you going to balance that with the jitters that ratings agencies say they feel when they hear terms like that?
You know, we have been saying that all of us must not be fixated in concepts. The fact of the matter is that there is high unemployment in South Africa, and there is impatience with regard to that, and the fact that some of the policy interventions we've implemented in the past have not addressed this issue as well as they should have. But government is going to continue on the trajectory of inclusive growth, which addresses industrialization, beneficiation, paying attention to our agricultural sector, ensuring that there is support for agro-processing, addressing issues of township and rural economies, ensuring that there is social and economic infrastructure investments in those areas, because it cannot be correct that South Africa's townships, the only economic activity that takes place there is spaza shops, car washes and hair salons. And so we need to ensure that there is productive economic activity at our big townships as well as rural areas. And we must also ensure that there are programs that address the concerns of black industrialists, black entrepreneurs, which means that we need to use government's 500 billion rand procurement spend to support black economic empowerment and ensure that our policies are aligned in that process. And we believe that all of those programs can be implemented within the fiscal framework that we've agreed to. And that is the reassurance we are giving investors, that when they hear these concepts, they must know that there is also a government in South Africa that is very, very interested in implementing the programs that will ensure growth in our economy. And those programs, of course, include industrialization, beneficiation, supporting our small and medium enterprises so that they become the engines of growth and employment, and ensuring that the South African economy is diversified enough for it to be able not only to continue along the old trajectory, but it also brings on board those that have been historically marginalized, who continue to be on the margins of the economy, who are unemployed, who have no opportunities for skills development as well as for participation in the economy as entrepreneurs. So that is the program that we are going to focus on. And so Treasury isn't going to confine itself only to fiscal management. It's also going to move into the realm of real economic interventions to induce growth, attract investments, but all of it within the fiscal framework agreed. And therefore, part of ensuring that we succeed in rolling out infrastructure will require that we announce plans for private sector participation and for private sector investment in infrastructure rollout, so that we can unlock the balance sheet of the private sector as well as those of the state-owned companies themselves. Because at the present moment, the balance sheets of many of our state-owned companies are quite weak, and they will need to be reinforced and bolstered by the private sector balance sheets, so that we can unlock the capital that is available in the private sector for investments in the South African economy. Because unless we can increase confidence in the South African economy, by the South African private sector and demonstrate that the South African private sector is committed to investing in the South African economy, we are not going to be very successful in inducing and attracting global investors to also have confidence in the South African economy. So there's a lot of work that we need to do that I think that is it's the type of work we are well capable of doing.
Minister Gigaba, when you go to the United States next week, what are you going to be saying to the IMF and the World Bank to try and reassure them about the situation in South Africa?
Well, we are going to be repeating exactly the same message as I have alluded to earlier, that there are many positives in the South African economy. Our economy remains vibrant. It remains the most advanced economy on the continent. It's diversifying, albeit slowly, but it is diversifying. We want to move the economy away from the heavy reliance on the services sector and the financial sector so that it can become a manufacturing-based economy that can create long-term sustainable jobs and grow on a sustainable basis. So we are going to portray both the positives of a growing economy that is showing signs of recovery from the slowdown that we have experienced in the last few years. We will talk about our commitment to fiscal prudence and ensuring that government doesn't spend money it doesn't have, and then talk to them about our plans to ensure we create new wealth, we expand the economy, and ensure that there are more participants in the economy, both in terms of those who gain employment as well as those who become entrepreneurs through the support for SMMEs and agriculture. Because at the end of the day, the South African agricultural sector is not producing as much food as it is supposed to, as it can, and compared to other middle-income countries, we are not creating as much employment as we should. And our SMME sector is quite slow in comparison to other middle-income countries. But there are plans to address all of these to ensure that we can increase the SMME sector, address the regulatory framework in order to remove the bottlenecks and all other obstacles to the growth of the SMME sector. So we will portray that positive message and the commitment by all stakeholders in South Africa to support the plans to restore our economy to investment grade and continue to grow it. Because labor, business, the civil society organizations, and many other stakeholders have spoken with one voice to say we understand the difficulties the economy is at, but we are confident about the economy. It remains buoyant. We believe that we can grow it with good leadership, with commitment, with working together. We can grow this economy and ensure that it continues to grow even increasingly in the coming years.
Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba, thank you for your time coming to us live there from Parliament.